Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. They say you should see the signs: missed meetings, vague compliments, the sudden shift in the air when your name's brought up. But I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I chose to ignore them because when you've poured 15 years into something, you don't expect to be blindsided. Not like this. It started with a calendar invite at 8:47 a.m. Strategic session, mandatory attendance. No explanation, no agenda, no familiar sender. The kind of vague formality that didn't exist before our new CEO, Graham Whitmore, decided the company needed more agility. That was his favorite word. He tossed it around like confetti in every quarterly update, always smiling that polished, insincere smile. Agility meant turnover. It meant consultants with buzzwords. It meant chaos hidden under pastel PowerPoint decks. I'd built this company, or at least the part of it that worked. When I was hired, Phoenix Tech was a 4-person operation run out of a shared office. I was the one who wrote the first vendor protocol, signed our initial logistics contract, and stayed late night after night updating our systems while everyone else went home. I trained 3 generations of operations teams, single-handedly handled crisis negotiations when our manufacturer shut down in 2013, and never once asked for a title bump. I didn't need one. My work spoke for itself. Until that morning. The meeting was held in conference room 5C. That alone was strange. Big strategy discussions always happened in the glass room upstairs, the one with the skyline view and the cappuccino machine that never worked. 5C was different. No windows, one long table, and a faint scent of old carpet shampoo. My heels clicked too loud as I walked in, but no one looked up. Except one person. A young man, mid-20s, maybe 26, sitting straight-backed with his arms folded, like he already owned the place. I'd seen him before in passing, but never spoken to him. Designer watch, smug confidence. The kind of person who assumed every door would open for him. He nodded at me, just once. No smile, no introduction. Beside him sat Graham, with that same rehearsed grin, dressed like he'd walked off the set of a leadership seminar. To his left was Monica from HR, tight-lipped, clutching a tablet she refused to look up from. "Linda," Graham said brightly, motioning to the seat across from him. "Glad you could join us." The chair was cold. "We'll keep this short," he began, voice smooth. "As part of our realignment toward a more forward-looking business model, we've made the decision to restructure the operations division." I blinked. No one else in the room moved. "To be frank," he continued, "we're looking to bring in younger, more agile talent, individuals who represent the future of this company. It's not personal, Linda. You've been a foundational part of Phoenix Tech, but the time has come for new leadership." There it was. He said it like a compliment, like I should be honored to be spoken of in the past tense. The young man, who hadn't said a word, shifted slightly in his seat, as if preparing to speak but choosing not to. Graham gestured toward him. "This is Tyler. He'll be assuming your responsibilities, effective immediately." Tyler. It hit me all at once. Tyler Whitmore, the CEO's brother. A recent graduate who had shadowed Graham for a summer and was now replacing me, a woman who had worked through holidays, illnesses, and family losses to keep this company running. I didn't say a word. I stood up, slow and deliberate, and nodded once. Monica still hadn't looked up. Graham's smile faltered for a moment, perhaps expecting a protest. But I wasn't giving him the satisfaction. I wouldn't cry in that soulless room. I wouldn't ask why. I walked out with every ounce of composure I could muster. But inside I was unraveling. My office was already locked when I returned. A stack of banker's boxes sat outside my door, neatly labeled. Someone had prepped for this. I bent down, pulled out my framed team photo, and stared at it. The version of me in that picture, smiling, hopeful, proud, felt like a ghost. As I carried the boxes to the elevator, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Linda Ferris?" a voice asked. Calm, measured, professional. "Yes," I said, too tired to care. "This is Jordan Niles. I represent a client who's been following Phoenix Tech for some time. We're interested in speaking with you. Privately. Today, if possible. I froze. I think, the voice continued, you may be more valuable than they realized. I don't remember walking out of the building. I don't remember crossing the lobby, nodding at the security guard, or even how I ended up sitting on the low stone bench outside the parking garage. It was as if my body was moving on autopilot while my mind replayed the last 30 minutes in an endless, painful loop. 15 years, gone in the space of a 3-minute speech. I sat there for I don't know how long. My coat was open despite the chill, and the box of my belongings sat beside me, lopsided. People walked past. Some glanced at me, most didn't. I was invisible. No longer part of the engine, a discarded part. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I hesitated this time. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was stubborn pride. Maybe I just needed to feel like I still mattered to someone. Hello? There was a pause, then a deep voice, calm, confident, familiar in a way I couldn't quite place. Linda Ferris, he said, my name almost a statement. This is Daniel Mercer. The name hit me like cold water. Daniel Mercer, CEO of Stratuscore, our biggest competitor, and someone who, as far as I knew, had never acknowledged my existence beyond an industry panel 5 years ago. My breath caught. Mr. Mercer, I said, stiffening. I didn't expect... I heard what happened, he cut in gently. Phoenix Tech made a mistake. But I want you to know something, Linda. I've been watching your work for years. You haven't disappeared from my radar. My chest tightened. He wasn't calling to offer pity. His tone was too deliberate, too assured. I'd like to meet, he continued. Somewhere quiet, nothing formal, just a conversation. I swallowed hard. I knew that kind of invitation in this world. Nothing ever really was just a conversation. Are you offering me a job? I asked, voice quieter than I expected. He chuckled, low and warm. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but I have a feeling this may be the start of something bigger. You're not just a name on a list to me, Linda. You're a mind I respect, a presence I could use. The silence between us stretched for a moment. Not awkward, electric, a promise not yet spoken. I could hear the city around me again, the hum of traffic, the wind brushing past the buildings, the life I had forgotten in the silence of corporate corridors. Where should we meet? I asked. And that was how it began. The cafe was tucked away in a quiet corner of downtown, glass walls, warm lighting, and a soft murmur of hushed conversations. It was the kind of place you went when you didn't want to be seen, but needed to be heard. Daniel Mercer was already there when I arrived. He stood as I approached, extending a hand that was both firm and welcoming. His presence was magnetic, not flashy, but commanding. A man who understood the weight of silence and the value of timing. Linda, he said simply, motioning to the seat across from him. We exchanged a few pleasantries. Coffee orders, remarks about the weather, the kind of small talk that veiled the tension humming beneath the surface. Then he slid a slim black folder across the table. Open it, he said. Inside was a plan, a detailed acquisition strategy. Stratuscore intended to purchase Phoenix Tech within the next quarter. Every line, every footnote, every legal contingency had been considered. But that wasn't what stole my breath. At the end of the document, under leadership transition provisions, was my name. Executive Director, Interim CEO. I stared at the words, then back at him. This isn't just a job offer, I said slowly. No, Daniel agreed. It's a stage, for everything they never let you build. My hands were steady, but my heart raced. They don't know yet, do they? I asked. Not yet, he replied. And when they do, it will be too late to stop it. The implications buzzed in my head. Me, stepping into the CEO's office at Phoenix Tech, not as an employee, but as the incoming executive representing their soon-to-be parent company. The idea was as surreal as it was intoxicating, but another question surfaced, stubborn and sharp. How did you know? I asked. About my firing, about all of this, so quickly. Daniel leaned back, his expression unreadable. Information moves fast when people respect the source, he said. I have people who monitor talent shifts in the industry. When your name dropped off Phoenix Tech's internal roster, I made some calls. There was something else in his voice, not just business, something personal. You've been watching me, I said, not quite a question. He met my gaze. You built the part of that company that was worth saving. I've known that for years. Now, it's your chance to prove it. I closed the folder and sat back. The cafe felt warmer somehow, the world quieter. Or maybe, for the first time in a long while, I wasn't drowning in someone else's noise. I'll need time, I said. You have until the end of the week. Daniel stood, left a generous tip, and paused before walking away. When you're ready, Linda, he said. Don't just walk through the door. Own it. I watched him go, the folder still resting under my fingertips. And for the first time since I walked out of Phoenix Tech, I didn't feel broken. I felt powerful. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my couch, folder open on the coffee table, the streetlights casting shifting shadows across the floor. I thought about power, about revenge, about rebirth. And then, I remembered something. A line, a paragraph, a clause I had drafted almost offhandedly years ago during a period of governance cleanup, when I was briefly brought into board strategy sessions. It had seemed insignificant at the time, but now, it was everything. Clause B. It stated, any former board member maintains a 90-day right to oversight and advisory access in the event of a pending acquisition or merger, effective from the last recorded date of service. It had been one of those bureaucratic footnotes that no one argued about because no one believed it would matter. I remembered inserting it, almost unchallenged, while revising a stack of policies. Most of the leadership team had skimmed past it. Legal had nodded it through. No one had expected that someone like me might use it. And after I was let go? They probably assumed it had been purged with the other documents tied to my name. But they were wrong. At 2:13 a.m., I powered up an old external drive I hadn't touched in years. My hands were shaking a little as I navigated through folders of backup files, policy drafts, and dated internal memos. And then I saw it. Phoenix_governance_revib_final.pdf. I opened it. There, on page 46, was Clause B clear. Direct. Still bearing my edits, my track changes, my digital signature. Unmodified. Valid. Legally binding. I sat back, heart pounding. My breath came slow, and even as the full weight of it settled into my chest. Phoenix Tech thought they'd erased every trace of me. That they could rewrite history, replace me with a puppet, and move on without consequence. But they missed something. They missed this. I still had oversight. Not just symbolically, but legally. For 90 days from my last board-attached project, I had access to internal data, meeting transcripts, transition plans. I had a right to be there, to see everything, to ask questions. And I wasn't going to tell a soul. Because when Stratuscore made its move, and Phoenix scrambled to hold their footing, I'd be holding the card they thought they burned. Sometimes power isn't about raising your voice. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stay silent, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And I could wait. It began with an email. Just one. Sent at 6:42 a.m. the next morning. The subject line was simple. Let's talk. I sent it to Allison Tran, former Director of Product Integration. She'd been forced out during a realignment 2 years ago, an excuse wrapped in pretty language. She had built half the user interface systems Phoenix still used. She replied within 8 minutes. When and where? Next was Marcus Doyle, the man who had kept our logistics flow alive during the 2017 supply chain freeze. He had been scapegoated when a vendor failed, something entirely out of his control. Then Priya Ramanathan, who redesigned the customer success framework. And even gruff, sarcastic Will Hobbs, who once told me the only thing holding the company together was duct tape and people like me. One by one, they came back. We met quietly. Neutral spaces, cafes, co-working lounges, even an old wine bar in the financial district where no one cared who whispered in the corner. They remembered me. And more importantly, they remembered the truth. Who had created the processes? Who had led through crises? who had quietly held the company together while others soaked up the spotlight. "I knew something was wrong the moment your name disappeared," Priya said. "They always feared competence." I nodded, listening, collecting not just words, but energy. There was a charge in the air, like dry static before a storm. While we reconnected, I laid groundwork. Quietly. I worked with a legal consultant recommended by Daniel's team, refining the language in Clause B, preparing to file official notices of oversight rights if necessary. I traced access points to Phoenix's shared legal repository, cross-verified the merger prep materials, and began drawing a digital map of transition pathways. I wasn't just watching. I was building. The transfer of power wouldn't come with trumpets or declarations. It would happen the way real power always does, silently and all at once. They'd wake up one morning thinking they still held the reins, and realize the hands guiding the horse weren't theirs anymore. The old guard was waking up, and I was leading them back home. 2 days later, a secure document appeared in my inbox, sent by Daniel's operations team. It was exactly what I'd been waiting for. A full list of Phoenix Tech's current executive leadership, names, titles, divisions, tenure, faces I once worked beside. Some I mentored, others I tried to warn. I scanned the list slowly, and with every name, the memory sharpened. Kara Ellis, once a junior analyst on my team, promoted twice in my final year. She had submitted a quiet but scathing review during my exit review process, one I wasn't meant to see, but found buried in an archived HR file. Ben Cray, head of strategic partnerships now. He'd shaken my hand the week before I was let go, told me how much he respected me. Then signed the internal petition calling for fresh operational leadership. They had all played their roles, not actively malicious, but complicit, eager to climb, willing to let someone else take the fall. I opened a new file and created 2 columns. Keep. Fire. My fingers moved steadily, calmly, with surgical focus. There was no anger, no vendetta, just assessment, cold, clear judgment, the ones who fought to build, the ones who stepped aside, the ones who signed. For each name, I wrote brief notes, their contributions, their risks, their loyalties. I wasn't just making a personnel chart, I was creating the foundation for a new regime. Because when the merger hit, and it would hit fast, I needed to know who was staying and who would be escorted out before their morning coffee. By the end of the day, the list was nearly complete. I saved it with one word: sovereign. I returned to Phoenix Tech on a gray Monday morning, walking through its sliding glass doors with a new badge clipped to my coat. Linda Ferris, Strategic Advisor. That's what it said. To everyone else, I was just a consultant brought in to assist during a transitional period. No one asked who had arranged it. No one questioned why I'd been given clearance to sit in on executive meetings. I walked past the reception desk, past the hall where I had once spent 15 years pouring out my life, and not a single person stopped me. They didn't see me as a threat. Good. Let them underestimate me. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the executive floor. The walls were mirrored, polished, flawless, just like the illusions they tried to maintain. But cracks had already started to show. When the doors opened, I was greeted by silence. Not the productive kind. The heavy, uneasy kind. Phones rang unanswered. People whispered in glass rooms with furrowed brows and white-knuckled grips on their coffee mugs. I was escorted into a temporary office. Small, but well-appointed. A desk, a monitor, a view of the downtown skyline. They thought they were being generous, keeping me at arm's length but close enough to contribute. What they didn't realize was that this gave me front-row access to the chaos. And chaos, I soon discovered, was putting it mildly. Customer support requests were going unanswered for days. A major logistics pipeline had broken down because someone had failed to renew a contract. Sales leads were fumbled, twice, due to duplicate outreach. The quarterly roadmap presentation had been postponed 3 times, and no one could explain why the numbers didn't match. In the center of it all stood Tyler, the CEO's brother, fresh-faced, overconfident, out of his depth. He walked around with a tablet and a permanent frown, delegating wildly, asking questions he should have known answers to, and delivering monologues to hide his uncertainty. I watched him stumble through a stakeholder call, mispronouncing a client's name and promising metrics we hadn't hit in months. Behind him, his hand-picked team was unraveling. Mid-level managers looked to each other in confusion. Directors kept their heads down, afraid of being noticed. The mood was brittle. Fear, not respect, held things together. I said nothing. I simply observed. In one meeting, I watched Kara Ellis stammer through a status update while Tyler barked at her for figures she wasn't responsible for. She caught my eye once, just a flicker of recognition, and then looked away. In another, I watched Ben Cray dodge questions about a broken vendor relationship that I knew he had mishandled. He smiled too much, laughed too loudly, and left before the meeting ended. No one seemed to know who was in charge anymore, which meant, in time, they would start looking around. I kept a notepad on my desk. Nothing official, no labels, just quick sketches, notes, arrows, names, crossed-out initiatives, overlapping timelines, my own private intelligence log. I wasn't here to fix anything. Not yet. I was here to witness. And the most dangerous person in any room is the one who says nothing while taking in everything. Let them flail. Let the seams rip wide open. The reckoning was coming. And when it did, they'd realize the advisor wasn't just a visitor. She was the storm. It happened mid-afternoon, during one of those lull moments when the office buzz turned from chaos to confusion. I was reviewing the latest operations log when an email popped into my inbox. No subject, no header, just a stream of forwarded threads from an overwhelmed analyst named Rachel Lynn. It wasn't meant for me, but the moment I saw the contents, I knew it had landed exactly where it needed to. Attached was a customer feedback summary flagged as urgent. 3 major clients, long-standing, high-volume accounts, had expressed direct refusal to continue projects led by Phoenix Tech's current head of SEO, Charles Verne. Their words were blistering. Strategy disconnected from market reality. Delivered outdated models masked as innovation. Refuses to adapt, not aligned with current brand goals. I scrolled further. A breakdown of performance metrics showed a steady decline in organic traffic, lead conversion, and keyword relevancy. Charles had been boasting about numbers in recent meetings, but those numbers were paper-thin, decorative, all flash and no foundation. He had been my peer once. Not brilliant, but bold. And when I left, he had been among those who publicly supported the realignment. I remembered his signature at the bottom of the internal endorsement letter. But what struck me most wasn't just the decline. It was the silence around it. No one seemed to be ringing alarm bells. Either they were too afraid to challenge Charles, or they were too lost in their own fires to notice another blaze. I spent the next hour backtracking through Rachel's thread, mapping the timeline of client dissatisfaction. It hadn't started this week. It had started months ago. There were ignored warnings, soft flags, emails marked low priority that now read like premonitions. The client most vocal in their disappointment was Solarin Inc., a renewable energy tech firm we had fought hard to land 3 years ago. I remembered sitting across from their CEO, arguing the case for ethical and scalable growth. I remembered what it had taken to win their trust. Now they were walking away. And Charles? He was still holding weekly optimization briefings like a general who hadn't noticed half the troops had defected. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. The erosion wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was slow, silent, and deeply rooted in ego. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms, letting the weight of it settle. They had thrown away experience for optics. They had gambled on shortcuts and self-assured smiles. And now, the bill was coming due. I didn't forward the email. I didn't respond to Rachel. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way, and some collapses need to be heard, not warned about. For now, I let the cracks widen, because soon enough, they'd cave in. It happened at precisely 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. The press release was brief and clinical. Standard formatting, the company letterhead, and a single line that broke the silence like a thunderclap. Phoenix Tech announces Linda Ferris as Interim Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. By 9:07, it had reached every inbox in the building. At 9:10, the Slack channels went quiet. By 9:15, you could hear a pin drop on the executive floor. I arrived exactly at 9:30, dressed in slate gray, hair tied back, expression unreadable. The badge still read advisor, but it was now only a formality. Security had already been notified. It had already changed credentials. Legal had already prepared the documents. No announcement was made over the intercom. No speech was given in the break room. No one ushered me in. I simply walked. Through the hallways. Past the departments that once ignored me. Past the whispers and sideways glances. No one dared speak. Some stood. Some stared. Some bowed their heads, remembering. The door to the CEO's office was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The decor had changed. Modern artwork. A massive gold-framed mirror. A leather armchair in the corner meant to scream authority. And on the desk, Tyler's desk, was a digital nameplate still blinking with his credentials. I didn't hesitate. I opened the drawer and removed it. The monitor booted to the login screen. I typed in my credentials. Accepted. Within moments, the room was mine again. I didn't need applause. I didn't need validation. I just needed silence. One by one, I began removing items. Not dramatically, strategically. The oversized ego trophies went first. The etched plaque, next-gen visionary. The glass sculpture that served no purpose. The branded notebooks filled with empty brainstorming jargon. Each one placed gently in a box. There was no anger in my hands. Just precision. I found my old coffee mug in the bottom drawer. The one with the faint crack in the handle. The one that had somehow survived 15 years of early mornings and late nights. I placed it beside the monitor. It belonged here. The final piece was the framed motivational quote on the wall. Disruption breeds progress. I stared at it a long moment, then pulled it down. Behind it was a faded pinhole and a faint outline of the photo I'd once hung there. Me and the old team, the ones who had stayed late, who had bled for deadlines, who had laughed through power outages and wept through layoffs. I smiled, a real one. Then I opened my briefcase, removed a sleek black folder, and laid it on the desk. Inside were the next 90 days, and they belonged to me. The meetings began the following morning. One by one, I scheduled them. Private, 15-minute windows. Enough time to hear the truth, or to confirm silence. Every employee who had remained at Phoenix Tech when I was let go received an invitation. Some arrived fidgeting. Some smiling, nervously hopeful. Others tried to appear confident, as if the shift in power hadn't affected them. I greeted each one calmly. I didn't lecture. I didn't accuse. I asked only one question. Why didn't you say anything? Some apologized immediately, voice trembling, remorse etched into their posture. They admitted to fear, to politics, to cowardice dressed up as professionalism. I should have said something, Linda. I knew it was wrong. Kara Ellis whispered, her eyes avoiding mine. I just didn't know how to fight it. Others justified their silence, told stories about being caught off guard, or assuming there was a plan. I nodded, took notes, but I made no promises. Apologies were accepted only when they came without defense. Some didn't speak at all. They sat, folded hands in their lap, eyes blank, as if the moment hadn't arrived. I marked their names quietly. With each meeting, I grew quieter inside. Not colder, just clearer. Every apology was a window into the true culture we had become. The excuses spoke louder than the regrets. And then Megan walked in, my former assistant. She entered slowly, clutching her phone like a shield. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just emotionally dimmed. Tired, hesitant. Her eyes flicked around the office before settling on me. She sat across from me, tears already glistening in her eyes. I owe you more than an apology, she said. I owe you the truth. I said nothing. I was asked to watch you, she continued, to report if you were resistant to change, if you started asking questions. Graham said it was standard protocol during transition. She paused, shaking her head. But it wasn't. It was betrayal. And I did it, because I thought it would protect me. The silence between us was suffocating. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I hated every second of it. You were never cruel to me. You never dismissed me. You brought me into meetings when no one else would. And I watched you get dismantled and said nothing. I kept your schedules for them, took notes they asked for, and once I I printed the HR memo announcing your removal. My chest tightened. I won't be silent anymore, she said finally. Whatever you need, I'll do it, not for redemption, but because you deserve better. I watched her closely, and I believed her, not because of her words, but because of her shame. Real shame doesn't posture. It pleads. It shows itself raw and vulnerable without needing forgiveness. I stood, walked around the desk, and placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't owe me, you owe the truth. Start there. She nodded, breath catching. As she left, I noted something unexpected in her walk: resolve. That's when I knew. Redemption might be rare, but it wasn't impossible. And just like that, the reckoning continued. Not loud, not dramatic. One face, one choice, one truth at a time. And just like that, the reckoning continued. Not loud, not dramatic. One face, one choice, one truth at a time. It was late afternoon when Charles Verne walked in without being scheduled. He didn't knock. He didn't wait. He entered like he still had power, like he still expected the world to revolve around his voice. Linda, he said, with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We haven't had a chance to catch up. I remained seated. I've been thinking, he continued, stepping closer. We're in a new chapter now. I think we could make a great team, you and I. My insights, your leadership, real synergy. He said the word like it meant something, like it would convince me to forget the past. I opened a drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the desk toward him. He looked down, confused. What's this? Your termination, I said evenly, effective immediately. The silence between us cracked. His face faltered, shifting from confusion to disbelief. You're serious? I didn't blink. You've already assisted us by revealing your true nature. He opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, but thought better of it. The weight of reality settled on his shoulders. For once, Charles Verne had no clever spin, no prepared defense. He picked up the envelope with a shaky hand and left without another word. No shouting, no theatrics, just quiet consequences. I watched through the glass as he walked down the hall, shoulders stiff, head slightly lowered. A few employees peeked from their offices, uncertain of what had just happened, but aware that something had shifted. I turned my gaze to the window, the city below bathed in gold from the setting sun. There was a strange calm in the air, like the brief, still breath between thunder and lightning. My fingers drummed lightly on the desk. Charles's removal wasn't about settling scores. It was about standards, about restoring a company built on substance, not illusion. And if I was going to rebuild Phoenix Tech from the ground up, there could be no room for the rot that had spread beneath the polished surface. Every decision now mattered. Every move had to be deliberate, purposeful. There were more names on my list, more meetings to schedule. But as the door clicked shut behind Charles, I allowed myself one moment of stillness. This wasn't vengeance. This was reclamation. In the weeks that followed, the office adjusted to the new rhythm. Some adjusted willingly. Others did so out of necessity. But all of them, in some small way, felt the shift. Linda never raised her voice. She never made grand declarations or sweeping speeches. She simply showed up, made decisions, and held people accountable. She wasn't interested in praise. She was interested in truth. One afternoon, she walked past the glass conference room where just months ago she had been forced to box up her things. That same room now held strategy meetings, her strategies, with her hand-picked team. A junior analyst she had mentored once stood outside the room. He looked nervous. She stopped beside him. "Something on your mind?" she asked. He looked at her, then nodded slowly. "How do you do it? Stay calm, not let it get personal." Linda smiled, soft but resolute. "Oh, it is personal, but it doesn't have to be messy. When you know your value, you don't argue, you act." She turned to leave, then paused. "And one more thing," she added. "Never mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes it's just preparation." That night, as the office lights dimmed and the last elevator hummed to a stop, Linda sat alone in her office, the corner office now. She opened her notebook and wrote a single line at the bottom of a clean page. Integrity is remembered longer than power. She closed the book, and then she got back to work.